The Ward Scott Files is produced by Ward Scott Files, LLC.
Come on, everybody! Come on, everybody!
This is a Ward Scott Files advisory. The Ward Scott Files radio show may contain material not suited for people who are easily offended. Trust us on this. This show contains adult information and opinions. Please protect small children, sensitive pets, fragile houseplants, and liberal relatives. Thank you.
All right, good morning, good morning. Here we are on the Ward Scott Files, and we're in the Warthog Man Cave, so we're nice and snug in here now. We're not cuddle buddies yet. I mean, we don't believe that. In fact, Jay and I think the only real cuddle buddy place could possibly be legitimate for us would be on the goal line, stand at the bottom of the pile. They're trying to stop the guy from scoring. Right, Jay? That would be the way we'd do it if we had our preferences. Well, we've got a lot of things to talk about, and locally here, for those of you who are watching this across the nation, just hang in here because what we're talking about could affect you because we're talking about Andrew Gillum. Andrew Gillum narrowly missed being the governor of the state of Florida, and that was a narrow clip, as we say, out at sea when we just barely missed the iceberg. This guy is being investigated the whole time he was running for the governorship by the FBI for all sorts of unethical behavior, and that's going to actually come to pass. The inquisition by the ethics committee is going to come to pass towards the end of this month. I think it's April 25th. We'll try to get the date exactly right, but I think that's the date it comes to mind. And we've got a situation here that could easily play out into the national scene. So we want to keep you, those of you who are checking on with our national audience, we want to keep you up to date on what you're dealing with here in case this guy should raise his head again and find himself as a vice presidential candidate, because you know how it is now with diversity and inclusion and a person of color. Well, that's always got to be on the ticket, and he is not going to be taken lightly because, after all, he is coming out of the state of Florida, and the state of Florida is a very important state nationally, and how will it go? And so he has been a subject of a lot of scrutiny by us here on the Ward Scott Files, deliberately so. Just to give you a recap, we have found out that his brother was registered to vote in two different areas, and we found that out through investigation by the Ward Scott Files team. And I think the brother is now being checked out for, voter fraud, and that doesn't surprise us because, particularly in South Florida, we're loaded up with voter fraud, and I think there's a lot more voter fraud than anybody can even begin to imagine. For a long time now, we've been loosening up the restraints and just letting basically anyone who can make a fog on a mirror be, eligible to vote. And we've got people rejecting in the Democrat side of the aisle here any kind of questions that would get at in the census whether or not you're a citizen, and then there's some who just want to let everybody vote, as I say, who can make a fog on a mirror. So we're keeping an eye on Gillum. But there's a local wrinkle to this, and those of you who are checking on nationally, pay attention to this, because we have a GRU facility here, utility, Gainesville Regional Utility, that is actually governed by the City Commission. And if that isn't an opportunity for a fiasco, I don't know where there's a better one. And those people who use Gainesville Regional Utilities are not necessarily people who can decide who is on the city commission, because the utilities are fed out over the lines beyond the city limits and people don't have any choice. So you could easily live outside the city of Gainesville and have to use Gainesville Regional Utilities and have no say-so in your representation on the board because you can't vote for the commission. There was an attempt by a senator, Keith Perry, and we expect possibly he'll check in with us at 7:45 today from Tallahassee, if he's freed up from committees and things, to talk to us about an update on the Tallahassee world. But he tried to get an independent committee to govern the utility, and that got voted down, and had a lot of propaganda against it here by the city commissioners because they didn't want to let up their grip on power. So setting the stage for you as to what is going on with the utility. And I know this is not the sexiest thing that you could be thinking about, but this is the way governance and politics actually work. And that's why there have to be guys like us who will go in there and take a look at it and try to boil it down to its essence for you. So you've got a utility that is run by a completely Democrat, liberal, I would say criminal board, and it's the commissioners, and about 15% of the city votes on them. The other percentage of 85% have gone home. They've gotten tired of being able to make a difference. So you've got about 15% of the city putting these 7 jokers on the commission who are very poorly prepared to take care of their own finances, let alone somebody else's, like the utilities. So the utilities has had to borrow money because they've gone in debt over bad contracts for a biomass experiment that was pushed and fostered on the community by a hothouse plant, what I call a hothouse plant. Begin Underhand, I call her name, it's Hanrahan, I call her Underhand. Begin Underhand, who was is what we call a university baby. She was raised in a university town, went to university high schools, went to the university. Her mind is all filled up with the university dogma and academia. Comes out and becomes the mayor and perpetrates his hoax on the campaign on the community that the coal is no good and you're shaving off the mountaintops and you're ruining this and that one and another. So let's go to biomass and let's burn trees. So it became a big wood burning stove, and then they got taken by a guy who fleeced them, who had the contract up and a main for this whole thing, and they had to pay for that excessive amounts, and that got all tangled in the wire. So the GRU thing is really problematic from top to bottom. On top of that, it has changed directors to fit the politics of the commission. There was a very good director here back in the day called Mike Kurtz, and he gave the scientific analysis as why the source of energy for the utility was perfectly okay, but it wasn't one Underhand wanted to hear, and so they fired Mike Kurtz. Now they have a man by the name of Ed Bilarski, who basically sings the party line. By that, he doesn't want to get crossways in the road with this incompetent commission, so he basically sings the party line. And what he's done is he has brought in Andrew Gillum to speak to a quote-unquote Brighter Tomorrow scholarship banquet, which is an annual event that's organized by the Gainesville Regional Utilities. And what it tries to do is find people to give scholarships to help them get out of the side of the road and into the mainstream productive thing. There's probably nothing wrong with that, except it is a ruse. It's already been used by Corrine Brown, and it ended up throwing her in the jug for it. So Corrine Brown is still in the jug here in Florida, and she tried to pull this. She had people come out and donate to her scholarship fund for kids, and of course that scholarship fund for kids went for hair weaves and fingernail jobs and whatever else, and rides in big cars and all that stuff. And she finally got caught on that. So it's not too distant a deal here now where we're going to bring in another person of color here, one Andrew Gillum, who is a graduate of a local high school here, Gainesville High School, and is buddies with a very prominent black power family here called the Chestnuts. So that group has got a son named Chris Chestnut, who's not even mentioned in all this. I think they're trying to hide him because he's coming up to be disbarred by the Florida Supreme Court. So he's also the buddy, he's the godfather of Gillum's kids. And so the Gainesville Regional Utility had it set up for Gillum to be the speaker. The only kicker in all this is they made it public that they're going to pay him $10,000 to come and speak. Now, I'm going to get into how this is unbelievable that they would do this, and the people in the community went bonkers about this, because here you're having to borrow money and you're going up on the commercial rates and running off business in the community, and our rates are going up and we don't have any say-so over it and input in it, and now you're paying this joker $10,000. And by the way, we know half of us don't even agree with his politics, but you can't get that out because the Gainesville Sun, which we call the Mexican Sun, is also a liberal rag, so it supports all the left-wing propaganda. So now the utility that has got all of these prisoners, I call them, who are customers who have to use it and can't say so whether they don't want to use it, are now subsidizing a political agenda by having Gillum come in here. That's the way it is seen by the public.
Does the $10,000 come with a theater ticket?
Yeah, and so he's got, now here's the other kicker, and I'll go through the Gainesville Sun article, which we fed a lot of the information to the writer on. Of course, social media being what it is right now, the Gainesville residents went out and took issue with his speaking fee, and started saying if he's going to be paid 10 grand, then he should be donating the money back, and so there was intense scrutiny. Meanwhile, the Gainesville mayor, Lauren Poe, how low can you go? Bowtie Poe, Greca's my partner, and Greca's the outfit that fleeced the city on the deal with the biomass plant. He promoted this guy, Gillum, on his Facebook page and said, I'm looking forward to me being back home, Gillum wrote, and Gainesville's given me so much and added to the person that I am today. Who is the person that you are today? Right now, you're under investigations for ethics violations. You've got alleged criminal behavior in your background while you were the governor. You've got Soros and a PAC given to your campaign. He's got, and by the way, Gillum, I'm going to cover this because Politico has gotten on to this guy. Gillum has got a PAC with $4 million in it, and the question is, if he had all that money at the end of the race and he only lost by a few percentage points, why didn't he spend it on his race? The whole thing in politics is you never end up with any money in the bank when you're running a race. And if you need more money, go raise more money. So they're wondering what he's saving that money for, what he's trying to do with that money, and where's he going with it, and what's he going? Is he gearing up for this vice presidential thing? But anyway, he's got $4 million in a PAC, as I understand it. So what's he being paid 10 grand for? Now, the other thing that I'll get into with you in a minute, Bilarski, I'm going to get into his statement because it doesn't pass the smell test. But now, because of all this pressure from the public, he has now said, he's backpedaled, walked it back, some as they say, and he said, and this is the kicker, I planned all along to give the money back and donate it. I never really intended to take the money. Now, here's the problem. If he actually takes the 10 grand and then gives it to charity, he's going to pay taxes on the 10 grand. We don't. These subtleties are not lost on us. So when he says, I'll donate it back, really what he should be saying is just don't even bother to give me the money. Keep it and put it towards the scholarships, because if you give it to me and I donate it back, then I'm into taxes. So meanwhile, all the propaganda is coming out. Poe has said, how low can you go? Bowtie Poe has said there's not a more inspiring story than the life journey of Andrew Gillum. Well, Poe's evidently not very widely read. Really, Poe, is this the most, you said it, there's not a more inspiring story? Are you kidding me? Have you not read very much, Poe? I feel like, I think I ought to email him and tell him, Bowtie, are you sure you mean what you said, that there's not a more inspiring story? Are you aware of all the stories of life's journeys that there are, and you're going to put this guy at the top of the heap? And by the way, Bowtie donated to Gillum the maximum he could donate to him, and Gillum turned around and reciprocated and donated the maximum to Poe's campaign. So you got the old thing again, the two peas in a pod or birds of a feather. So, but Poe says he's a Gainesville product. He's an inspiration to millions of people. It doesn't get any deeper than that. I hope your feet are up as we report this. He's an inspiration to so many people. What? So meanwhile, Ed Bilarski, who is now the puppet propaganda minister for GRU in the city, said the event will be successful because of Gillum's appearance. And he says, I'll stand by this decision every day. This is a quote. And the writer of this is a pretty good writer. It's a guy we use quite a bit, Andrew Kaplan. So we feel like, in the Mexican Sun, there are some good bright spots, and Andrew Kaplan's one of them. But Bilarski says, I'll stand by this every day. If we could have 5 or 6 of these a year, I would do it. And, what he's really saying is, I guess he knows it. 5 or 6 what? Liberal events at taxpayer subsidy? Is that what you're saying? 5 or 6 of these a year? That's what this is. Are you going to bring in, well, I'd be fine with it if you bring in Trump or you bring in somebody from the other side of the aisle, let them be the speaker. Plus, there's a kind of a cheap shot in here. I intend to ask the president this. Bilarski says that, well, we've had people like Jackson Sasser, president of Santa Fe, speak at this charitable banquet. Well, I want to find out if Jackson Sasser was paid. And I certainly hope he wasn't. And if he wasn't, why is Gillum being paid? And if Sasser was paid, what happened to the money? So, there's something that doesn't work here. It just doesn't add up, okay? That doesn't make sense. So we question all this. Like I say, this is the same old. Now, once again, and he says he's going to donate this, and he said he intended to do it all along. Well, I'll let you be your own judge about that. Meanwhile, Tallahassee Reports, as we've been reporting, is really on to Gillum, and they particularly feel burned by Gillum because he was their mayor. So they looked at he's now, Gillum, as the Tallahassee Report says, he's the chairman of a political action committee called Forward Florida. It lists his address at 240 North Magnolia Drive in Tallahassee. And Politico recently reported that the PAC raised and spent funds on Gillum's campaign for Florida governor, and it still has about $4 million in it. So what is this all about, as I said a moment ago? What is this $4 million doing lying around in a PAC in Tallahassee? What is he getting ready to do with it? So that's why, for those of you who are checking on and listening, beyond our particular city limits here in Gainesville and out across the country, you need to pay attention to this guy Gillum, because he's being groomed to be somewhere, somehow, in a position of further influence that is, as far as we're concerned, going to be followed by all sorts of shady behavior, some of which is yet to be fully resolved, because there's this ethics commission that's going to take a look at this. So, it's not unusual that we're having these kind of issues, I guess, for many of these people really feel like the rules don't apply to them. It just seems like the rules can be changed too, like the Democrats are doing with these. They don't want to accept the exoneration by the ghoul Mueller. They want to now go in and have an investigation of the investigation and the investigators, and they want to keep that as stirred up as possible as they can. It's like a kid in the class that won't stop throwing paper wads. I mean, come on, settle down and listen to the lesson. No, they're not interested in the lesson and the welfare of the rest of the kids in the class getting an education. They want to disrupt it for their own purposes and throw paper wads and spitballs and everything else that goes down. So that's kind of the way I look at it, having been in a classroom. I know these people are especially exercising disruptive behavior. But unfortunately, like in high school, we had a dean we could have come down and haul them off to the detention hall and put them in the jug after school. I don't know how you haul off Fat Jerry and you haul off Bug-Eye Schiff and you haul off Sleazy Cummings and these people. I don't know, and Mad Maxine. I don't know how you haul them off unless Lindsey Graham can really, really keep the pedal to the metal and keep an investigation going on this crowd that has been getting away scot-free for quite a while now. Now, over here with we reported on this. I just need to bring you up that the cops are demanding that Fox be taken out of office in Chicago. That's going to be an interesting thing to watch, because we know that Fox is crooked as can be, and we know that there's been interference in Chicago all the way up to the highest level, and that's with Obama. Obama and Michelle, then her handmaiden attorney, then sent word down to, we'll back you if you want to cover this, drop this thing. And so the Washington Times has been watching this, and the Chicago area cops are demanding that Kim Foxx resign. So, and it's not just a small group of cops, it's a group of suburban cops around Chicago, because a lot of them have to deal with this overflow, and they are influenced by the Cook County State Attorney's Office. So there's 30 police chiefs, according to the Times, who attended a joint news conference Thursday with Chicago Police Union President Kevin Graham to ask that this Fox step down. I don't know if they can make her step down. She's not going to step down on her own. It's just like how low can you go, Bowtie Poe? He claims he's got the support of the electorate in Gainesville. Well, people. He didn't say electorate, the people. Well, he's got the support of those who voted, which is about 15%. He's got the support of 60% of those. And I don't know what that comes down to in total population. I haven't calculated, but that's not very many. But he claims that gives him a blank check. So Stephen Steller of the West Suburban Chiefs of Police Associations told the reporters it wasn't just about her handling of the Smollett case. As we reported her in the Ward Scott files, there's been a lot of bad blood go on between the cops and this woman for quite some time. And, of course, she's of the ilk of Obama that the cops are to blame. And even though many of the cops are people of color trying to, herd the crowd of color, this person of color is turned on her own, if you will, because they're cops and says, the problem is the cops. It's not the people who are shooting each other that the cops are trying to stop from shooting each other. So the cops say it wasn't only about her handling of the Smollett case. He said that Fox's policies not to prosecute many low-level felonies is letting the cops down. Now, we got the same situation here in this area here, where we've got people, who are all for, turning the other head, turning your head and not, and these guys go in and out. It's kind of like a revolving door. They go into the judicial system and right out the other side, and either get deferred prosecution or adjudication withheld or some other deal that's worked out. And in a hookah lounge shooting here incident, the guys out there who plugged each other actually were convicted felons here who'd been in and out of the judicial system already and turned loose on the bricks again. So it's, it is what it is. The whole system, I think, throughout the country has been negatively influenced by Obama, and it's been hanging around. Now, Mad Maxine has got a comment on this, and I thought it was worth going through her logic, if you can call it logic. If you can call what Mad Maxine uses as logic, she should have been on the Chitlin Circuit or something and been a singer in a rock band. Maybe she'd have been okay there, because she is a kind of energetic woman. She's a youthful woman. Well, she's in her 80s, Jay. She's in her 80s. She could have been one of the Supremes or something if she had any talent. But somehow she found herself into the political world where, she's right in there with the others. I mean, you can't, it's fine. I mean, they're no better or worser than she is. So, but I thought it was really interesting her logic, if you want to call it that. This was in an interview with the NAACP Image Awards, and they were asked her about this decision to drop the Empire actor Jussie Smollett. And she said the following, and I'll put this in your notes and you can do with it what you want to. It's the correct thing that the charges were dropped. First of all, we probably will never know all of the details. We've heard a lot of information. Now, Jay, you're a smart guy, okay? You're going to the university. She put the conclusion before the cause for the conclusion, right? She said, well, it's the correct thing that your charges were dropped. And then she says, on the heels of that, we'll probably never know all of the details. Well, let me ask you something, students. How can you conclude that it's the correct thing to drop the charges when in the next breath you admit you don't know all the details? Huh? I mean, am I the only person who gets this stuff?
It's simple deductive reasoning.
I mean, it's a syllogism. I mean, come on, Mad Maxine. You can't have it both ways, you idiot. Now, if the woman were in class, she'd obviously probably play the race card if I corrected her on this. But listen to it again. It is the correct thing that the charges were dropped. First of all, we probably will never know all of the details. Well, you can't drop the charges without knowing all the details, unless you just don't give a damn about the details. So then she goes and starts making up details. She must have sensed there was a hole in her argument, okay? She must have somehow heard her own head rattle, all right? And then these are her reasons why she doesn't think the details really matter, I guess. She says, 1, no one was hurt. Yeah, no one was hurt. And she says that is physically killed or shot. So here's what Mad Maxine is saying. The only thing we're going to prosecute. Oh, come on. I mean, isn't this self-evident, Jay, for a thinking person? The only person that we're going to prosecute, according to Mad Maxine, are those people who've been killed somebody or shot somebody. Short of that, you can do any damn thing you want to do and get away with it. You can rob the bank. Hey, and this was basically the reasoning on the Gentle Giant in Missouri. Well, he didn't do anything. He was just fixing to go off to college, and he was dreaming, and he was a good lad. And, he didn't really do anything in that convenience store, and he stole stuff and walked out with it. And the poor little Asian owner tried to stop him, and he shoved the Asian owner up against a dadgum display stand there and knocked all the crackers over. He didn't. He didn't kill him, and he didn't shoot him. So what the heck's the big deal on the Gentle Giant? He's just a youngin' getting ready to go to college. So the youngin' walks down the street, and the cop has answered the call of the heist at the convenience store, and the Gentle Giant comes over there and tries to take the cop's gun away from him. Well, the Gentle Giant didn't shoot the cop with the cop's gun, did he, Maxine?
I'm listing her as a witness at my next trial.
And Maxine says that, he didn't shoot the cop and he didn't kill the cop, so why the hell did the cop kill him? I mean, this is really good stuff, because this is an X-ray into the brain of some of these people like her that Obama played to and called it a racial issue, and that the minorities were getting screwed over by the cops. And unfortunately, when they lumped and generalized about the cops, a lot of the cops are minorities. And that's the case in Chicago. And that's why the cops in Chicago can't stand Fox, and it's black against black. It's going to be really interesting how that works itself out. Meanwhile, they're still plugging each other down the street, and Mad Maxine would excuse every bit of the stuff that's going on the west side of Chicago if they didn't kill anybody, then it's not a crime. It's the craziest thing I ever heard of. And when I read through this stuff, I said, you cannot be serious that this woman is actually spitting this stuff out at the NAACP meeting. And I'll guarantee you nobody there called her hand on it. Somebody should have stood up and said, Maxine, you're making us all look stupid. Huh? Then she goes on to say that this situation goes on all over the country every day, and it isn't unusual. Oh, God.
Stupidity?
Oh, God. Oh, God. So it was a correct thing to do because no one was hurt physically. Oh, and that Smollett had a clean record, which he did not have. He did not have a clean record. Oh, she lives in La La Land, man. She lives in La La Land. Put that in your notes. I mean, that is Mad Maxine's logic. And it's not that far off the beaten trail of a lot of people's logic, including the doggone white progressives. But as Professor Warthog, I can't let her get away with that stupidity. Now, would Mad Maxine pass my class? It would depend upon whether she was willing to learn and put aside her ideological blinders, because she couldn't get through the exercises if she did everything and filtered it through the ideological blinders. It just won't happen. I set the course up so that couldn't happen. Anyway, where is that on the ratings of stupidity? Huh? Is it off the scales? Really? Well, it's basic F in a thinking class. If anybody's really teaching and holding people accountable for what they're doing, it's a basic F. I mean, how else could you couldn't let that stuff go on and do? Well, the only person who can get away with this, I would go ahead and say this, I guess. And I'm not going to go too far with it, but it seems like the only person who can get away with this is a politician. Politicians can make it up all day long And nobody, although, as I said at the start of the show out, we did kind of stop this thing with this perpetrated hoax with Gillum coming here and getting 10 grand. And, it doesn't, there's a lot of things that are goofy. I pulled this up because I wanted to follow this on the heels of this conversation with you.
Denise says, stop being nice.
Stop being nice. Listen, I'm just calling the game, okay? I'm the umpire in this thing. Was it a ball or a strike, what she said? Okay? I don't think it was a strike. I mean, I don't think that was an accurate pitch. That logic was awful. I'm just calling the game. Don't razz the umpire. I thought I'd pull this up. Al Sharpton had a National Action Network convention, and the Daily Caller went and studied the 10 most intriguing things there that were said. So maybe some of this stuff will rival Mad Maxine, or maybe she gets it there. Who knows? Who knows? This is O'Rourke, and somewhere we had a picture of O'Rourke when he was a hippie. I don't know what we did with it. Well, see if you can find it. It's horrible. But O'Rourke said, we've got to make sure that we confront those who will use fear to hold on to that power, as our president uses fear to hold on to that power, to make us angry, to keep us apart, to make us fearful of one another and even of ourselves. Boy, now there you go. What the heck was that? That is, once again, politically speak, huh? Then there's a South Bend, Indiana mayor who was at this Al Sharpton thing, who's Mayor Pete Buttigieg. He's a Democrat. He said, a strong American economy is good for everybody Thursday. That idea just doesn't work. Rising tide lifts all boats. Just isn't true, he said. So they're trying to dispute the economy. Is that the dude? That's Abrams. She's nuts too. But there's the deal, yeah. Then Abrams, who's not yet decided where she fits. She's a smut writer on the side. She writes smut novels, sex novels, and really, yeah, Jay, and they're really bad. She has a nom de plume. Yeah, she has a nom de plume that she writes under. But I've read some of the sentences. They're horrendous stuff, really smutty stuff. So her brain tends towards smut. And she's got several of these creations anyway. So she's got a double identity. Boy, would Trump not have fun with that, campaigning against her? Just read some of the smut novel aloud. So she hasn't decided whether she's going to run for office yet. And she said at the Sharpton event that you see her at there, Jay's got her, I believe in identity politics, and I believe identity politics are the only politics that win. Now, what the heck does that mean? Huh? Identity politics are the only politics that win. What in the heck does that mean? Am I asking too much? Am I asking too much to ask that the language means something? This guy Castro, who served in the Obama administration, he hit on the universal pre-K thing, and he said, we need universal pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds in our country so that everybody gets a strong start in life. I kind of don't disagree with that one. That one probably the closest to sensible we can get to. We got a guy named Yang who ran in the Democratic 2000. He's running in there. He touts himself as the opposite of Donald Trump. And here's what makes him the opposite. He believes in doing away, he believes in giving all Americans, ready, Jay? This is solve your problems. Giving all Americans $1,000 a month. Can you handle that? Then, here's what he would do. He would legalize the nasty marijuana. Okay? Then he would pardon everyone who's in the jug for a nonviolent drug-related offense. Well, he didn't kill anybody, right? He would pardon them on April 20th, 2021, and he said he would high-five them on the way out of the jug. Huh? I don't know what to tell you, man. It doesn't get any better than that. I mean, these are the things that we're dealing with. Meanwhile, as Jay put up earlier, the Communist News Network is so unpopular now that, it can't even get off the floor. It's been knocked so cold by responsible news outfits. Not a single CNN show placed in the top 20 during the first quarter of 2019. John Nolte writing this. It's so unpopular that throughout the first quarter of 2019, not a single CNN show averaged enough viewers to reach the top 20. And that's not the top in all of cable television. That's the top 20 divided by only 3 networks, Fox, NS, NBC, and CNN. In other words, with only 2 other networks as competition, CNN could not place even one show in the top 20. I never watch them. I don't know. I guess they were the first to think that they could. This was Ted Turner's idea that you could make a show out of news 24/7, and I guess for a while it did happen. It was the only show in town, but then it got infected with stupidity. So, it's really got some nutcases over there now, and this was all before the release of the Ghouls report that CNN already was tanking it as getting a reputation of fake news network. So. That is interesting. So if you're looking for a silver lining in all this stuff, I think there are some. Meanwhile, there is still the case, and we got the hat up there in the back, and we thought we'd throw this in there because this seems to be an endless saga that somebody wears the magma hat, and next thing you know, you gotta slug it out of the restaurant. But there was a woman, Catherine Rodriguez says that there was a woman who works at a music store. Now, they did can her butt for this. She confronted someone in a Starbucks. Now, this Starbucks stuff is loaded as far as I'm concerned with liberals. I don't know what else is in there, Jay. Huh? Starbucks is at the opposite end of the continuum from Chick-fil-A.
Needles, that's what's in Starbucks.
Yeah, Needles. It's in the opposite end of the continuum from Chick-fil-A, and they're banning Chick-fil-A from every place because it doesn't have anything nice to say about LGBT, WXYZ, whatever. So the San Francisco Gate reported that this woman, Parker, I can't make this up. This is the name. I don't believe it. Parker Mankey. Huh? Parker Mankey. M-A-N-K-E-Y. Parker Mankey. That's a woman. Yeah, the woman's name is Parker Mankey.
That doesn't sound like a woman.
It sounds like it might have been adapted as a new name for a new life or something.
Yeah, it sounds like whatever it is a little bit
confused.
Wait.
Let me see. Let me have to reread that. Oh. No. I think that's it. And then she was berated this MAGA hat dude in front of everybody in Starbucks, okay? Yeah, it is. She then ripped a guy on Facebook because he wore the red Trump campaign issued hat, the one we have there on the shelf. And she said, he will never forget me, and he will think seriously about wearing that hat in my town ever again. Now it's her town. And if you see him in this hat, you please confront him. You do not want to be the person who didn't speak up as we slipped into fascism. Yeah. Well, it's either fascism or it's the KKK, one of the two. Okay.
She needs to get her stuff straight.
Now, the guy wearing a hat, it could have been you, Jay. You could have been mugged by this lady, okay? Oh, the man... Oh, Victor is what they say. The woman called him a Nazi and tried to entice other Starbucks customers to mock him. So he says, the woman comes over and she says, is that a Trump hat? And he said, I think it is, yes. Huh? I think it is, yes. And then she turns to the rest of the audience, the people in Starbucks, and says, hey, everybody, come over here. Let's get this guy. He's a hater. She says, of course, hatefully. She doesn't see that, right? I'm calling him out. He hates brown people. Now they're brown people. People of color is too much to say when you're shouting in Starbucks, okay? You can't say black people because that somehow has become out of fashion. You certainly can't use Negro and all that other stuff. So you've got... Well, what about if you got a tan? I mean, you know, but he hates brown people. He's a Nazi. Oh, so she worked for something called Gryphon Strings Music Store, and thankfully, they canned her. Huh? So the happy ending to that one. There's a happy ending to that one. They canned her, huh?
That's what Mad Max. We have a comment. That's what Mad Max told her people to do.
Oh man, I mean, it is really. And then just when you think you have heard everything about academics that you could possibly hear, that you hear one more thing, and this is at the University of Kansas. Now, University of Kansas is a big outfit, and it's going to offer a new course, Jay. And you need to rush out. I think you probably take this online, okay? Don't you need some extra credit somewhere? It's a new course entitled, Angry White Male Studies. Angry White Male Studies. I think they've got it wrong. Go take a look at black-on-black crime in Chicago. Go take a look at that. Tell me if it should not be Angry Black Male Studies. I think that would actually be a pretty interesting course.
What about Angry White Woman Studies?
Well, yeah, you could do that. You could do the angry white woman story, like this woman who just ran the guy out of Starbucks, I guess. Well, how about just angry human studies?
Everybody's angry.
Well, not me. I'm a gentleman, okay? Now, the course is going to examine the angry white male and the deeper sources of this emotional state. So we're going from male cuddling. Male cuddling. Maybe that's what they'll do. They'll redirect the angry, they will redirect the angry white male. It's coming your way, Jay. At the University of Kansas, it's going to be focusing on just 2 countries of angry white males. Okay, you ready for this? America and Britain. Huh? Yes.
Because the French don't deserve consideration.
French don't have any men. They're all wusses, okay?
The froggies don't count.
And they darn sure don't want to go to Germany because they really are the real deal, right? Yeah. Huh? And they don't want to go to Russia. They don't want to examine an angry white guy in Russia. They don't want to examine an angry white guy in Germany. They don't want to examine an angry white guy in Italy. Oh, my golly. Oh, yeah. And where else? And we don't want to, in Australia, we want to get after just 2 countries, and that's America and Britain. It's going to be, yeah. I think we got our buddy Keith. Yeah, we're going to talk to Keith Perry here in a moment, calling in from us. We got him on the line, Jay? Okay. So anyway, my men and women, that's where we are right now. We got Senator Keith Perry on the line reporting from Tallahassee what's going on up in that world. So we'll be glad to talk to him in a moment as soon as Jay patches the store. And you can get through, Jay. Well, it's not my issue. Jay's trying to figure out which button to push. But this Angry White Male Study is going to be offered at Kansas University. And there's going to be another course called Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies. That would be, and that would be an interesting course, huh? So, you got me patched through, Jay? Can't hold on too long here, Jay. Got a ship to run here. So, really, the course is examining the rise. Now, there's been a rise of the angry white male since the 50s. I don't know if you've noticed that, but there's been a rise since the 50s, exploring the deeper sources of the emotional state while evaluating recent manifestations of male anger. That's the course description. Let me read that again. The rise of the angry white male in America and Britain since the 1950s, exploring the deeper sources of this emotional state while evaluating recent manifestations of male anger. So, this is going to be an interdisciplinary perspective and how dominant and subordinate masculinities play a role in the cultures that we're under, in the cultures that we're undergoing. What you got going, Jay? I can't deal with that. Okay. I think it's the operator. So that's one thing. The other thing that's important to know while we're trying to get this thing working with Keith is students at one of the universities where Kavanaugh is a guest speaker. Okay, he's a guest professor. They want to fire him. They don't want him being a guest professor. I'm trying to find which university it is where this is going on. And yeah, here it is. The Kavanaugh is a visiting professor and at George Mason University. And the students want to fire him from this visiting professorship. It's a 3-year contract, and he's a distinguished visiting law professor at and this course is entitled Creation of the Constitution, and it's taught by Justice Kavanaugh and law school professor Jennifer Mascott. And they want to fire him and can him from doing that course. It's really interesting that why they would even entertain this. It's a petition that is going around that is accusing the institution of George Mason University of having a historic amount of institutional negligence with regards to supporting survivors of sexual assault, the student body as a whole, and this caps this off by the hiring of Justice Kavanaugh. So in the student's mind, Kavanaugh is associated with all those, what do you call those identity politic things? Call him back, Jay. Okay. Okay. I'm going to go on, Jay. Jay's having a little trouble with the buttons back there, so we'll see how it go. The other thing I want to tell you is that we just got this latest report that's just come in that this Easter wraps deal is been moved yet again. It was at the fairgrounds for a while here in Alachua County, all right? It became an issue whether or not you could secure it and whether you'd fill out the proper paperwork and all that kind of business, and got moved. It couldn't do any of that stuff. So it got moved over a place called Mars Park outside of Archer. And now I understand that it has been moved from Mars Park to a place in Waldo called the Waldo Motorsports Park. All right, now the Waldo Motorsports Park is it's up on 301, if you're familiar with this area. It's going to have the very same problems, all right? The very same problems of security, of all that business that would be problematic no matter where it was. They're now talking having 7,000 people or so, 7,000 people coming to this. I'm listening to Jay in my ear trying to work out the technicalities here. Jay, where are we? Jay, I got to go on. So anyway, I want to talk a little bit about, too, I don't know if I have time to do this. He actually successfully gets Keith Perry through here. It's very, it's not my bailiwick. It's not something that I'm involved in. I want to get into the story, and I'll probably have to abort it here in a moment. But the Democrats, and if I don't get through this story today, I'll get through it next time. The Democrats plan to lock in a majority. They have a plan with all this stuff that you're seeing right now. With the various investigations into the investigations. They are planning to take over, of course, Congress. And they also want to take over the court. They also want to take over the papers. They pretty much have taken over the papers. They want to take over the academia. They have pretty much taken over academia. So what are they trying to do? They're also trying to add states, and so what we got now is they want to pack the court. So what they are doing, since they've been defeated pretty much everywhere they turn, they want to change the rules and they want to cement their control and prevent the voters from ever reversing their trends. This is written by Stephen Law on how Dems plan to lock in a majority. Okay? How Dems plan to lock in a majority. And Law is president of the Senate Leadership, which is an organization that tries to elect Republicans. And so he's aware of it, and he's trying to make sure it doesn't happen. So it's called HR. Speaker Nancy Pelosi kicked off this strategy with the first bill she introduced after taking back her gavel. I want to give this update to you. It's called H.R. 1. And what H.R. 1 would do, we want to keep an eye on H.R. 1, it would aggressively regulate speech that criticizes any federal politician, even on policy terms. H.R. 1 would federalize the state voting system, okay? Effectively wiping out registration deadlines and anti-fraud safeguards, as well as requiring automatic registration of people, all right, as young as 16. Let me repeat that. This is a bill that Pelosi's introduced, and it is one that we'll need to keep an eye on, H.R. 1. It would aggressively regulate speech that criticizes or applauds even any federal politician, even on policy terms. That, of course, was not politically correct for these people. H.R. 1 would federalize state voting systems. Okay, I can't. Go ahead. Hello? Hello, Keith. How are you doing? Can you hear me okay?
Everything's going very well. I had a little bit of phone problem this morning, but yeah, we're connected now. So
Good. Well, let me hear what you got going on in Tallahassee. There's so many things we're interested in. You got about 10 minutes. We'll go over if we have to. We don't have any time when we have to quit, so we'll stay with you as long as you want to get your information out.
Yeah, well, and I can't remember last time all what we talked about. Probably the biggest thing, and unfortunately disappointment, one of the biggest bills I had going this session was a workman's comp reform. And unfortunately, that bill didn't make it out of committee on Monday morning. And what was amazing to me is I live this as a roofing contractor, paying these exorbitant rates, what they do to both the cost of everything we need, and then the pressure on working class people that stagnate their wages and make everything that they need to survive cost more. We always talk about working class people, but never seem to do a lot for them. This bill was a pretty comprehensive. It extended benefits for medical issues and indemnity, permanent impairment ratings for people who had permanent injuries, did a lot. Extended benefits from 2 years to 5 years. Yet the trial attorneys, got on board because it dealt with fees, and more than their fees, it really dealt with attorneys having to be more transparent and submit data on their hours they had worked on a bi-weekly basis. So the trial attorneys just hated it, but the fact that they were able to get some of the unions on board was a pretty amazing feat. They didn't get the, not the fire and the police and those kind of unions, but some of the other working class, they were all opposed to it. You talk to a worker and you ask them why they oppose it, and they go, well, I don't know, but it's a bad bill. And, I give the trial attorneys credit for, just, making them think it's a bad bill. That really would have had a huge impact in the state of Florida. But they were able to use the behind the scenes stuff and got that bill killed. It was unfortunate. But we're going to keep working on it next year, and, patience and perseverance get you through.
Well, that was one of the reasons I said to you last time we talked that the Orlando Apollos had to practice outside the state, because little known to the public, the workman's comp and all that was so expensive, and it's so much cheaper in Georgia. So they actually went to Georgia to practice, Keith, and that was before the AF bellied up, of course. But that was one of the expenses, and it was, you're right. I mean, I did the calculations you were talking about, and it discourages from promoting people, what I understand, giving them raises and keeping people with you for a long time, but would build the strength of your business. It makes you turn it over and churn it constantly, as I understand.
Yeah, and if we had good public debate on it, trial attorneys, they make millions and millions of dollars. I think my data I had from last year, you're talking about $300 million was paid to attorneys just in workman's comp. $300 million out of the state, out of working class people's pockets to pay for attorneys. And we have an insurance policy. That was the other thing that I worked on. Workman's comp is an insurance policy. And and my goal was to make it more self-executing. So if you had a regular Blue Cross, Blue Shield, or Humana or whatever, you break your arm, you go to the doctor, you get it fixed. You don't get lawyers involved in every issue. But again, it was Monday was a pretty difficult day. I worked for almost 2 months on this bill. My staff worked, hours and hours. We had a very comprehensive worker protection bill, and but you have to not become vindictive. You have not to come, where these things kind of dominate you and you can't move on. So we're moving on. We're working on a lot of other bills, and from growth management to public records to we have a non-opioid informational bill that we're working on. Our growth management, I think, is big for Alachua County, that we can get some private property rights into the comprehensive land use plan. Been trying that for a couple of years too, and again, special interests really unfortunately dominate the political world. That's what just on a side note on that, people think that give government more money and we can trust government. Believe me, government is not to be trusted. And then the bigger it gets, the more corruption that's in the system. And we just got to understand that just, expanding government is not necessarily a big thing, because who controls the bureaucrats and who controls things are very powerful special interest groups. And, so people think that, everybody's looking out for the little guy, just not happening.
What do we got going on, by the way, with this making it more difficult to stick things out there on the Constitution? Is that going to make it?
Well, and we found, and so there's some bills out there dealing with the biggest, probably the biggest thing now, and there's two things. The changing the Constitution, we don't live in a democracy. Our founding fathers even said that democracy was one of the worst forms of government that you could have, because it would lead to anarchy and tyranny pretty quickly. And so what we do is with constitutional amendments, and constitutional amendments are a lot stronger than statutes that we can pass. So we've seen, and it's right and left. We have tremendous amount of money, professional companies that make hundreds of millions of dollars to go out and get signatures and put it on a ballot. So it's not really the grassroots effort that it was designed to be at the beginning. This is professional industries that are saying, hey, we're going to spend millions and millions of dollars, and we're going to get stuff done through more of a true democracy, where we just get enough people to understand our issue, or not understand it, because go stand in line at a voting place, and of all the amendments, ask the people to explain any of them and the implications, and 99 out of 100 people only have a very superficial level of knowledge about these things. So we're gonna, there's bills out there to make that, you can't have these out-of-state corporations come in here and get things put on a ballot. So there's a House version and a state version and a Senate version that are moving through. Don't know if they're going to make it this year, but there's certainly a lot of effort to get that done.
And one of the places where the pressure comes from to hire those guys, because I've been involved in a couple of these ballot initiatives and around here in terms of trying to get single-member districts, for example, out there for people to decide about here in Alachua County, as you know. That would kind of give us an electoral college type deal where we wouldn't be dominated here.
Sure.
You know how that works. But the pressure, the time frame that you have to get those signatures, and I advised some guys about this because they came to me, because I was involved with this with Senator Graham on Amendment 11, and I learned that you can't get those signatures just standing in front of Walmart with a clipboard, because the issue that you might be trying to get them to sign on to often is very complicated. So the time during which you get those signatures is also compressed, and I'm not sure whether that's done locally or by some sort of state statute or something, but that's where the pressure comes from to get the signatures. because outside of a certain limit, they become invalid. So that window forces these people, and I'm not for that. I'm not for them going out and getting these professional people to come in and do this, because it can be so easily abused by the big money people. The marijuana issue comes to mind with Morgan and Morgan and all that crowd, if I got that right. So I don't know how that accompanies it, but I'm all for the thing being done really grassroots, as you say. It may be an accompanying look needs to be given to this time frame during which those can be gathered.
Well, and that's the issue, is whether it's truly a grassroots method to do that, or whether it's a professional organization getting stuff done. And, we don't want George Soros to be able to change our Constitution just because he has a lot of money.
Right.
We don't want any group that can change a Constitution, even if it's a charter, even if it's it's a county or city. If it's a truly grassroots effort, then that's the way it should be. But it shouldn't be easy. It's not easy for us to pass laws in Tallahassee, and it shouldn't be easy for us to pass laws, and it shouldn't be easy to have constitutional amendments done. That should be a pretty difficult. It's a serious thing. We change a statute in Tallahassee, the next year, another legislator could change it back. You change the Constitution, changing the Constitution is almost impossible to do, and we're finding that out, especially with we had a lot of amendments. Probably Amendment 6 and Amendments 11. Amendment 6 is probably the worst. So Amendment 6, if you remember, that was the Marsy's Law. It was a victim's rights and notification, which made perfectly good sense that we would have victims potentially be notified. Well, if you read the bill and read the legislation, what they did, it also meant that you could be accused of a crime, and you would have no rights to even cross-examine a victim in a court of law. It was a constitutional contradiction to what we already have. How does a public defender who has a person who's, remember, you've been not convicted of a crime, you've been accused of a crime, yet you don't have constitutional rights under Marsy's Law, Amendment 6. It was the unintended consequences. That's not the intention of the Constitutional Amendment, but it's now, and it's in the Constitution of the state of Florida, that has, if you talk, when you get the public defenders around the state and their associations and the state attorneys around the state both complaining about this law, you understand that there were serious issues that would have never passed the legislature because it had too many problems. But because we didn't know and it didn't go through a vetting process, we're stuck with it now. So again, not opposed to them if it's done the right way, but we'll see how that works through the system this session.
Got a question that's come in about the arts, and that was a sensitive issue around this area here, was that the arts got a little bit depleted on the fund end because apparently Stoneman Douglas and that came up and needed some money, and it got taken from the arts. What's the story? Is anything going on in protection of the arts or refunding the arts, Keith, that you know of?
Yeah, so the funding, if I remember this, so our Senate budget just came out we passed our Senate side 2 days ago. The House passed theirs yesterday. Now we're going to conference. So I'm believing that we're going to have increases. I mean, it's been cut drastically, and it directly affects lots and lots of programs right here in our area. So I think you're going to see some compromise. I'm hoping that we can get the Senate side, and I can't remember the dollar amount now, but it certainly is much better than it has been the last couple of years. So we can see if we can get the House to come, and during the conference process, which will start right away, going through the conference. So what happens is the Senate, the governor has a budget. That's just his ideas, his recommendations. What we vote on is a Senate budget. The House votes on their budget and pass it. Our passed 40-0. I think the House has 8 votes. 100 and I don't know what it was, 112 to 8. I think is what the House was. So, but now what we do is we have to go into conference. At the end of the day, before we leave Tallahassee, we have to have a budget. The budget has to match exactly. They can't have 2 budgets. We can only pass one budget to send to the governor. So we'll go through that process. like I say, conference committees will start right away. I serve on the Justice Appropriation, so our committee will start working on these things and try to get into a posture sooner than later. Back to the arts, we'll see if the House takes up the Senate version on that and at least increases it a little bit more of an acceptable level. Not where we want to be, but more acceptable.
The school guardian program, allowing teachers to be trained to protect and be armed. To me, I'll tell you, Keith. This is just where we are. And we started out Santa Fe College. We didn't have anybody but a guy with some keys who came around and locked up the door, and we had our campuses right downtown. And then, after a while, we moved out to the interstate here and had our campus, and we still didn't really have anybody armed. And then along came Danny Rawling, and all of a sudden, of course, we went over to a full-fledged police department with people carrying guns on campus, which we, as faculty people, you know how people are in the academic world. They tend to be kind of liberal and tolerant, and they don't want to see that. But we did it. I mean, we had to do it. And we now have a full-fledged, police department on the Santa Fe campus, and, as heavily armed as anybody can be. So to me, it's inevitable. And given changes beyond our ability to control them, that we also are going to have to extend this, so to speak, school guardian program to train classroom teachers. I just don't see any way out of that, and I don't know what your opinion is on that or how that's going in Tallahassee. Understandably, it would meet resistance from people who would rather not be that way, but I think we've arrived where it's going to have to be. What's the climate?
Yeah, well, it's past its second committee stop, and I've listened and talked to people I understand, and we had protest a bunch of students from Gainesville. And listen, I appreciate students being involved in any effort they want to in political world. I think it's a little bit to have students come up and, they don't ask to be heard, they demand. Right. And they use this word demand. We don't live in a world where we just get a mob of people. They come up and say, we demand that you, elected legislatures, do what we tell you to do. And I've had some real reasonable people come up, but I've also had these people that believe that's how you're going to get things done. You're going to force elected people to do stuff just because you have a mob mentality. And I think I blame some of the adults that get 18-year-old, not even 18-year-old. We have 16, 17, 8-year-old students come up. I'm glad they're in the political process, but for them to come up and demand that I do X is wrong. And I think the teachers and students, if they're the ones pushing these kids to be this aggressive kind of nature, I'm not saying you don't get passionate. Passion is great, and working hard is great. But that whole model, it's almost funny that we're talking about this anti-bullying campaign and making sure we don't do it. Yet we have parents and teachers teaching our kids that you bully legislators.
Right. Good point. Excellent point. Is the voucher type program going to be funded with that going to expand? Is that going to be expanded, Keith?
I think so. And this is another, look, this is misinformation. Think about this. And this is what you're going to hear from the left. They're going to say, you're taking money away from our regular public schools and giving it to charter schools and to voucher programs, and that's wrong. And how can you ruin the public education? And look, this is the most simplest math you can do. 100,000 people in Step Up for Students through the voucher program, the scholarship opportunity, 100,000 or so. The state pays all in about $7,000 a student. For a regular public school student, the state all in with all the federal money and everything else is about $10,300. So think about the logic when they say you're taking money away. And the school unions tried to end the voucher program, say it was unconstitutional. The courts did not agree with them, and this is when it was a much more liberal court. Said, no, we don't agree with that. But say they would have prevailed. You would have taken 100,000 students, put them directly into the regular public school system, and we as a state would have had to come up in our budget with an extra $3,300 per student. So $330 million more the state would have had. We would have had that deficit that we'd have had to take from some other place to fund that. Not to mention that these scholarship students, the schools they hit, you talk about capital money, and there's a big debate about that. We could spend some time talking about it, but the capital investment is zero. The state gives no money to these schools for their facilities. So there we would have had about a 1.5, maybe up to a $2 billion investment in additional classrooms. And where's that money going to come from? So don't tell me that we're taking money from public education and ruining public education by giving it to voucher programs. We're doing exactly the opposite. If someone can't understand that simple math, they certainly shouldn't be involved in education. This is simple stuff. You can debate it on another area. You can say, I just hate the program, but don't debate it on a financial standpoint when it's the exact opposite.
And sure, I'm sure the unions fight that, no doubt. The educational unions.
Fight it, but don't use misinformation.
Right. Got another subject, and you tell me how your time is. And we know that there are many, many more people coming to the state of Florida, and we've discussed this before, both you and I privately, and of course publicly on these forums that we have. And it's something beyond our control. These heavily taxed states like New York, people coming out, coming down. So we're going to have to do something about transportation. And the controversy seems to be, as I understand it right now, Keith, about transportation projects through rural areas. I don't see any way around it. What's the conversation in Tallahassee about that?
Well, the proposal this year, and we had the Coastal Connector last year. We're going to have the Coastal Connector this year. It's a little bit different. What we're proposing the Senate, and it's been a priority of President Galvano, is to extend the Veterans Parkway, which runs from Tampa up toward Crystal River, extend that straight north to connect to I-10. And that would give all of the people coming that are heading east on I-10 to go to 75 to come down to wherever, they would have an alternate route. I don't know where exactly, and they haven't come up with the details, but think about this. And I know Commissioner Hawkins, who is, he's an anti-everything. I mean,
the doctor of no. He's the doctor of no.
Absolutely. But again, let's talk reality. Urban sprawl, and he mentioned that at one of our committee hearings. First, right now we've moved all of that development review processes down to the counties and cities. So the state's gotten out of that business. So cities and counties would have to decide on those development review processes. But the other thing, if you look at I-75, believe me, if the interstate system was trying to be built today, it'd never get built because of all the Commissioner Hawkinses and all his cohorts. They'd say, no, we can't ever do this, and we'd never have it. And think about how it's changed our lives to be able to get from point A to point B much quicker in these areas. But there's not, so certainly if there's a town and you build an interstate, that as a town grows, it doesn't make growth, but as it grows, it may grow closer to an interstate because of access to the interstate. But it doesn't create growth in and of itself. And if you take I-75, if you're on I-75 and I-10, take Interstate 10, there's lots of exits. And there's not just kind of giant growth at every exit. Just doesn't happen. It's you may have a place where you have some gas stations or McDonald's or something, but it doesn't make a big city there. You put this Coastal Connector through, it's not going to take and make all of a sudden make towns pop up at these places. It hasn't happened on the interstate system. It won't happen on this Coastal Connector, but it will relieve a tremendous amount of congestion off I-75, which is at capacity level now. So we're going to look at these things, and we're going to have the naysayers, and we're going to have the no growthers and other people, but we're going to push this. It's important for you and I, and for everybody else in the state of Florida to look at these. We haven't done a major road expansion in Florida in 50 years, and that was the Turnpike. We've added on sections to the Turnpike. We've added on sections to the interstate. But from a major road expansion, 50 years, that's the last time we've done something in this state. And if it's up to some people, we'd never do another one, and we'd all be, we take a bus from here to Tallahassee and a bus to Orlando or whatever else they want us to do. I don't know, but I kind of like having a car and being able to get where I want.
Yeah.
And, and I just one other thing, Ward, on that particular thing. This is what I find pretty frustrating here in Gainesville, and that is that we have a city commission and a county commission policies, and I'm not saying every city commissioner or every county commissioner, but their policies are that you build buildings on the road.
Right.
And you build buildings on the road so you can never widen the road.
That's
what
right.
they're doing, this is what the policy of the city of Gainesville is doing right now. The policy of the city of Gainesville says we are going to make and design and social engineer a city that for the next 100 years you won't expand roads. They're dictating for generations to come how this city's going to be. And I think that's incredibly disingenuous to the people. I think it's obviously I don't agree with that policy that just by they're not saying that we're going to look at a specific area and say we can 4-lane this 2-lane road. We're going to say you're never going to 4-lane a road or 6-lane a road. You're not going to do it, and we're going to make sure it never happens through a building permit process.
Well, one of the ways, of course, and this obvious to us here, you can't develop East Gainesville because you can't get to it. I mean, the only way you can get to it in relatively economical use of time is on 39th Ave. And you can't get on 8th Ave. You can't get on University. You have Williston Road, doesn't get you there necessarily. So I don't see how you're ever going to get to East Gainesville exactly for what you're talking about. We've narrowed the traffic and impacted the traffic flow negatively. And we're just taking it. And by the way, if the Gainesville Commission could get its hands on the growth westward, they would do it. I mean, they can't stand the Jonesville and Newberry corridor and all that. Obviously, is a place for growth in the future. So, well, Keith, we kept with you, and man, it's really been great talking. I got a clear connection. However, we're doing it, Jay. We ought to do it again this way, and I can hear Keith very, very clearly, and I know our people out in the public can. There are some other things we can talk about. I mean, medical marijuana and all that kind of
2 weeks from now, we'll get another catch up. I'll try to get a thing of where we are. We're halfway through session now. I'll get a thing a little bit closer where bills are done, what bills are moving through, about budget things. So certainly forward to talking to you in a couple of weeks.
Well, thanks so much, Keith, for hanging with us on the technical stuff. We got it done. And that's Keith Perry, Senator Keith Perry, our local senator here. Much appreciated. And does a great job and calls in every other Friday and tells us what's going on in Tallahassee. So we like bringing that feature to you here. We're going to have a guest next week, Phil Kerpen, who's going to be calling in from D.C., President of the American Commitment, to talk about what's going on in the Washington, D.C. area. So, Jay, thanks for hanging in there and figuring that out. He's got a lot of buttons to push back there, and sometimes things take unexpected twists, but he's a bright guy. He can figure out how to fix it, and he sure did today, so appreciate that. He leaves me a little dead air time, but after all, I'm a professional. I can handle that, can I, Jay?
Yeah, you can.
I can handle it, but he did a great job, and that's he's on the ball back there. So I really appreciate his help and the Big Daddy Productions and all the sponsors. Appreciate Senator Perry calling in and having a chat with you, and we'll get back with you on Monday, and hope you have a great weekend. Warthog Command Center out.
Thank you. God bless you. And God bless America.
Do you want to put your business in front of 10,000 new customers? Visit wardscottfiles.tv today for more information on our advertising opportunities.